This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
Welcome into episode number 109 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. We are back and at it early on this Sunday morning, the beginning of May, and we are one day away from some Stanley Cup playoff action. Oddly enough, actually, there is one more regular season game actually going on today, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's a reschedule for the Winnipeg Jets. I forget who they're playing, but it's doesn't mean anything for anything. That's all I remember.
I think it's Seattle.
Yeah, I think you are right. They do play at 2:00 Eastern, 1 o'clock Central Time. I was trying to figure out how time works. The voice you're hearing next to me, as always, Mr. Nick Maxon. Nick, welcome back. We are happy to have you and happy to have all of our listeners. After Nick and I took a week off, got a lot of things done, took a little bit of time for ourselves as well too, and now we are back and at it for some playoff action. And very excited for what the playoffs are going to bring. We're going to talk a little bit about that, or a lot about that, obviously related to the Minnesota Wild and their first round matchup against the St. Louis Blues. And then our extra ice session, we're going to talk a little bit about Dryden McKay. We're going to talk about the thing you think we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about it in terms of how do we actually really evaluate players when it comes to some of the medical background related to the way that we test players. So it should be an interesting show. And we will start, as always, with Center Ice View News and Notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, Noah, and, well, 2 weeks of things that happened, and, yeah, a lot of things that did happen. So let's get everybody up to speed, shall we? So, biggest news of the last 14 days, passing to Montreal, Canadiens icon Guy Lafleur, age 70, legendary, to say the least. 1971, when he was drafted, 379-point, 118-game career in the QMJHL. For those not familiar, that is essentially the French side of the OHL side, but yeah, the big junior league team. Few big names have come out of the QMJHL. Maybe Sidney Crosby, maybe Nathan McKinnon, just name a few. Lafleur was a 5-time Stanley Cup champion, 3-time Art Ross and Ted Lindsay winner, 2-time Hart Trophy winner, single-time Conn Smythe Award winner during his time in the NHL, including a 60-goal season. All-time assist leader for Montreal and points leader at second in goals, only behind Maurice the Rocket Richard. Another name that maybe has a trophy named after him.
The reason being is that he probably would have won the Maurice Richard trophy a couple of times too, but the trophy actually wasn't invented. So oddly enough, the guy that he was chasing in Montreal history, he probably would have had a couple trophies named after him too as well. But
yes, definitely for sure. 1988 Hall of Fame inductee. Number 10 was retired by the Canadiens in 1985. This last season, the Canadiens officially secured the best draft lottery odds after finishing in last place this season, although it kind of was a different story towards the end of the season as they got Marty St. Louis behind the bench. They seemed to actually started to play a little bit better. So hard to think that they were even worse than they were. So Canadiens were the first team since the Carolina Hurricanes in 2003 to finish last place in the league a year after making the Stanley Cup final. And the draft is set to take place, of all places, Montreal at the Bell Center, July 7th and 8th. The Kingston Frontenac Center Shane Wright is the projected first overall selection. He's been, I suppose, the projected first round selection for the last couple of seasons here, Noah, and would be very hard to see him not go number one overall. And how about staying in Canada, where, yeah, they need some help.
They do. It's going to be an interesting little draft, kind of an interesting draft class. I don't think it's the strongest class in the world, but definitely some guys I think that maybe could fly under the radar and could really turn into some players that could be some key players for franchises. I think that's always what makes it interesting about when you have a draft class that has a lot of unknowns when it comes to seeing how guys are going to develop into the next level. I think this is one of those draft classes where I think the middle, from maybe about pick number 5 to about 15, I think you might get some interesting ones where we'll look back in a couple of years and say, wow, they drafted that guy. Imagine if they would have taken, so-and-so. We have that every year, but I feel like this is a draft class that really could have a lot of intrigue a couple of years down the road for the National Hockey League. Speaking of guys that not necessarily drafted by any means, but still really good at hockey. Other big story of the past couple of weeks, recent Hobey Baker winner and newly minted Toronto Marley, Dryden McKay, signing his contract. But in mid-April, McKay essentially announcing that he accepted a 6-month US ADA sanction due to a doping violation after a positive test arose when he was an alternate member for the United States Olympic team. So he originally faced a 4-year ban, and this sanction was reduced to half a year after the substance was actually found and identified. So he did declare this substance in the beginning, but they did find out that there was Ostarine that was part of his vitamin D3 immune booster that McKay used for COVID-19 that was improperly labeled or improperly marked with this particular substance. And this is crazy to me. And we're going to touch on this obviously in the tail end of the show. But this D3 immune booster that the Minnesota State netminder he took contained about 1/trillionth of a gram of Ostarine. For those who are wondering, that's a decimal followed by 11 zeros and a 1. Like, that is insane how little of an amount that actually is. That provided obviously no performance benefit for Dryden in the 10 days that he took it. So kind of an interesting story, but nonetheless really doesn't have a ton of bearing on Dryden's career. Thankfully, he's eligible to use Toronto's facilities on August 25th, and he can play for the Marlies when they begin on October 11th. So obviously good to see Dryden get his shot at the next level. And, I guess good on the NCAA for not really disrupting this process too much and understanding that it really didn't have any bearing on his NCAA career. And I also obviously seen the Hobey Baker Foundation say that they're not going to strip him of his Hobey Baker title as well too. I think the hockey world handled this appropriately. Just kind of a difficult thing to see how he's been kind of drug under the bus by some people who didn't take the time to read it.
Yeah, that's I think there's a lot to unpack here, but I think I want to say this for later on in the show, just because there's a false dichotomy that's here as well, Noah, that we're kind of missing in this, and there's also to me a rock and a hard place also for the doping agency as well as the NCAA. So the true nature of the beast is not actually going to get fixed. That's the problem with this. And I think that's the most frustrating about this. And what's more intriguing and more frustrating is that there are likely to be more cases like this. And unfortunately, this could result in harsher penalties for people who maybe aren't deserving of those penalties. So, but we'll do a deeper dive a little bit later, I believe. So, with that being said, let's do some quick hits, right? NHLPA set to begin a search for the replacement of Executive Director Donald Fehr. Donald Fair. I don't know why I kept seeing Fair. Maybe I'm fearing of the morning today. 73 years of age. So for those who don't know who that is or what he does, he's essentially the representative for the players as a entity as they negotiate contracts, different things in health and safety insurance for everybody that's in the league, right? So 7 NHL players, along with Donald Fair, will begin the search, and he will also stay director until his replacement is found. Search committee will provide a progress report on the pursuit of his replacement by mid-July. So this is again a lengthier process, not something you want to rush. I do remember before Donald Fair took over, before the 2011/2012 CBA negotiating rights. So let's say things were, they were not good. So it is a very important position for the players. And I know that, it's one that has a lot of weight on how the NHL actually can be shaped moving forward. The IIHF, let's go internationally, has stripped Russia officially of hosting the 2023 World Championships. Also, on Wednesday, the CHL made the announcement that Russian and Belarusian players will also be ineligible for this year's CHL import draft, which is slated to take place on July 1. Of course, this ban comes in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. NHL's Global Series, meanwhile, will return with games in the Czech Republic and Finland. San Jose and Nashville will play 2 October games in Prague, and Colorado and Columbus will compete for 2 games in Tampere. Tampere. Okay. Tampere. Excuse me. I do want to watch Prague, and I would imagine the NHL has a backup plan in case things continue to persist over in Eastern Europe. I would imagine that that's still very much up in the air, and I would hope that there's a backup plan in case for that. U.S. Customs, how about this? Seized 10 counterfeit rings mimicking the 1936 Detroit Red Wings Stanley Cup victory. So why? I'm not sure, but sure. Jack Adams was the coach of the year. He's the only person in NHL history to win a cup as a player and coach and a GM. And speaking of the Red Wings, a couple changes there. So a longtime Zamboni driver Al Sobotka was fired after 51 years. He has filed a lawsuit against the team because of that firing. The 68-year-old has a medical condition related to prostate care, with symptoms causing sudden urination. Couldn't get to a restroom, so he urinated in a drain that carries ice runoff from the Zamboni machines at Little Caesars Arena. He thought no one was in the building, but someone noticed it and reported it. So he's, probably not in the greatest spot there, despite the medical condition, unfortunately. And speaking of Red Wings, Noah, I'm not sure if you had this anywhere, but also, I think you have some. It's actually next. You have some news on some other Red Wings changes coming through.
Yeah, no, I am on top of it a little bit, kind of ish. At least my prostate's doing okay. But beyond for now, yeah, no kidding. Beyond that, it's kind of interesting. A couple of those stories that are in there. First of all, exactly how I feel about the CHL import draft. The fact that we are punishing young players because of their nationality with this. I understand the message, but I mean, this is a very critical stage for a lot of these players when it comes to developing their hockey craft. This is, I mean, think about this. Imagine if one day we say, oh, the Capitals are in the first round of the playoffs, Alex Ovechkin's got to go back home. It's kind of an odd thing. I think, not to say it, I'm not saying it doesn't have any bearing on world events, but it's also hockey. I just want to put it, I think, in that particular realm. The Red Wings counterfeit rings, like you said, I don't really understand what the purpose of this is. Obviously, it would be pretty obvious to me that they don't have 10 rings from the 1936 Detroit Red Wings. That would be a huge haul of rings that you would end up getting. That would be
a lot of money's worth. So
yeah, seriously. And then the Zamboni driver, kind of an interesting deal all the way around. I think just because of the fact that, maybe you let him retire or kind of talk through that medical condition. Because if it's causing that much of an issue, maybe kind of just like open up that discussion instead of maybe firing him. But like I can also see from the team perspective, I can see why that would be a potential issue. Quite obviously,
no, it is an issue.
I don't know.
Because you have two things at play here. No, one thing you're forgetting is, medical information, having the pandemic and some other groups told us that even your vaccination status is supposed to be private. So Yeah, right. I'm obviously joking here. So,
Yeah.
but then are we supposed to then disclose something where in other states this is regarded as essentially exposing themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things like where I think in the eyes of the Red Wings, I think maybe it's something you clarify just to say, hey, you know what? This is something that is potentially going to affect the way that I do my job. I mean, think about this in the sense that
From the driver's perspective.
right, like
Yeah.
yeah, because it's like, I mean, you could be driving a Zamboni and it's something if something's coming, man. Like that's just kind of how these things work. And I think that maybe,
It also depends.
but I can also understand where he didn't want to say anything because he probably wants to keep his job. And I think that that's where I think the Red Wings maybe need to define an alternative method and maybe sit down with him and say, hey, what's going on? And maybe the best course of action was, you finish out the season and maybe you file for retirement and then you move on with your thing.
He lost that opportunity when he did that action. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where, unfortunately, in today's day and age, no one's assuming that a medical condition when that's coming out. Unfortunately, there's
right. But that's exactly my point. The Red Wings didn't investigate at all. They just said, oh, this happened. So clearly, we're just going to get rid of him instead of just having the discussion. It could have been very simple. You know what? I've had this medical condition.
Here's the problem with that.
I couldn't make it to a restroom, and that just opens up a bigger discussion.
That is you cannot sell that story to the general public, unfortunately. Because and here's my point with that. I'm not saying that story isn't incorrect and medically correct. The problem is what's the precedent you set then?
Yeah, well,
that's the problem. That's the problem. Had the Zamboni driver himself taking necessary mitigation efforts, such as, I know we like to give crap to people who like wear Depends and stuff, but that's an option. Yeah. Obviously, if you're, I hate to say it, but if you're waiting that long, you shouldn't be. But you cannot sit there and expose yourself in a public setting.
Yeah.
Even if no one's around, because even if there are cameras around, someone's seeing this. And fortunately, in today's day and age, if you are exposing yourself with a part of your body that is considered sexual in nature, that unfortunately is very narrowly defined nowadays. And that's just not something you're going to win that argument no matter what.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess I just see it from the perspective that it's like I think the Red Wings maybe should have at least just inquired, or maybe just been like, dude, what is going on here? You know what I mean? Instead of
I'm sure they did, but I think they have the same mentality as I do, which is okay, but preventable, probably sort of thing, right? Where it's okay, we get it, this is a medical thing, but really this didn't need to happen, kind of thing,
Yeah.
Probably.
I just wonder if
it's a moot point. Yeah, honestly, it's a moot point.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, the guy is 68, so it's like, maybe the best course of action would have been to just give him his retirement papers at the end of the year and just kind of like, I don't want to say sweep it under the rug. That's not what I'm trying to say, but like, it's also kind of what I'm trying to say, because it's like he's been there 51 years. Like, he's had a career. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know the best course of action, but obviously, if you have a medical condition that requires disclosure to your employer, not that you have to disclose it, this is a story that maybe you keep your eyes on in the future. Someone who is not going to be disclosing anything to the Detroit Red Wings will be Jeff Blashill, who was finally terminated of his contract after 7 seasons with the club. 204, 261, and 72 record over that time. Assistant Doug Hoda and netminding coach Jeff Saleko were also released after the club finished 25th this season under Steve Yzerman at the general manager role. So I think that's a club that is maybe looking to continue to kind of reform and redevelop and get back to where they were in hockey prominence all those years ago. Other exec news: former U.S. Olympian Amanda Kessel joining the Pittsburgh Penguins executive management team. Chicago hiring longtime Chicago Cub executive Jeff Greenberg as associate general manager, and longtime Los Angeles King Dustin Brown. He plans to retire after the playoffs here at his age 37 season. Veteran player, 13th overall pick way back in 2003, has spent all of his 18 seasons with the Kings and is the only American captain to win 2 Stanley Cups. I did not know that. That's actually kind of a wild thing, if you really think about it. Almost 1,300 points, good for 7th in franchise history. So Dustin Brown is kind of a guy that, had a really great start to his career, kind of disappeared in the middle of his career, and then has really seen a little bit of a resurgence later in his career.
Had some injury problems, I believe, during that time, if I recall.
Yeah, so congratulations to him, obviously, on a great career, almost 2 decades in the league, a very long time to be playing. Always seemed like a good guy when he could figure out what direction the water bottle was supposed to face when he was supposed to drink the water on the bench. If anyone remembers that video from NBC all those years ago.
Yes.
Milestone news, Alex Ovechkin tying Wayne Gretzky and Mike Bossy for the most 50-goal seasons in the NHL with 9. You wonder, if you take out a lockout and a COVID year and a half, how many 50-goal seasons he might actually have if he has already broken that record.
He might break it next year.
Yeah, hopefully, if he can stay healthy. He did have a little bit of an injury bug at the tail end of the season, so you kind of worry about that as he gets up there in age, obviously. 780 career goals, also trails Gordie Howe now by 21, and Gretzky on top of that leaderboard by 114. So going to need a couple more of those 50-goal seasons to have a shot at that record. Young defenseman Cale Makar for the Avalanche, setting a new record for most points by a defenseman, hitting 83 points, besting Steve Duchesne for the Quebec Nordiques back in 1992-93. So congratulations to Cale. He's going to be a great force for the Avs for a long time. And finally, in injury news, Nashville on edge right now, entering their playoff series after netminder UC Saros. He's going to be hurt with a high ankle sprain that's going to keep him out potentially 4 to 6 weeks. Kind of a scary blow for this Nashville team. Marcus Foligno, Minnesota, very questionable for game 1 against St. Louis after that knee-on-knee hit from Colorado's Curtis McDermott, along with Matt Zuccarello, who is nursing a lower body ailment. So Minnesota having some question marks in their series. Dylan Larkin, as the Red Wings finish up, he's out for 3 months after core muscle surgery. And Vegas's Robin Lehner, what a story this has been, undergoing shoulder surgery after playing through the injury for almost 3 months. And welcome in episode number 109 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Myself, Noah Grant, joined alongside by Nick Maxon as always. Nick, we are back after a short little hiatus here on this Sunday morning. How was your time off? Was it productive? What were you up to? In your
time off? I don't understand the question.
Relative time off,
right? Well, for those playing the home game, it really wasn't time off. It was just not recording an episode here, but plenty of things that are still a lot of work. There is a marathon to the finish line, graduate obviously coming up here this week. So we have a final project that we're still trying to put some finishing touches on. Also travel out to Vegas for the National Association of Broadcasters convention. So it was good to get away a little bit, although, talk about this, Noah, 40 miles that I walked in 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a lot. And that's
I'm
not
a math guy, but that's a lot.
It's a lot. Then that's not including, that's straight walking. I mean, we took the monorail to and back from the hotel, and there was a Tesla tunnel underneath the convention center now. Yes, there's a new little underground thing there that's actually pretty cool, but no, that there's a lot of walking, and my calves are screaming. Let's put it to you that way. It was nice to feel some sun and some heat for a few days, but geez, the red eye. Yeah. That sucked. That was rough. I actually had my flight delayed by about an hour coming back. So the flight was supposed to leave at midnight on Tuesday night / Wednesday morning. We actually pushed back from the gate, revved up the engines, and usually, you do a couple pre-flight checks. It takes you about 2 to 3 minutes, and you're off and taxiing to the runway for takeoff. We sat there for about 5 minutes, and at that point, I'm thinking, crap. There's something wrong. So I had a window seat. So I look out to my right, and all of a sudden there's, what they call the wing spotters who've got so I see them walk back out. I'm like, crap, we're going back to the gate. Sure enough, straight back, 80 powers down. We ended up finding out there was a medical emergency in the back of the plane.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So there was a gentleman, I think pretty much the very back row, was sitting next to his wife, and he passed out.
Oh, wow.
So The wife got a hold of flight attendant. Now, from what I understand, and this is obviously very hearsay, but he was very reluctant to give away what was happening. Wife eventually was like, dude, you gotta tell him what's going on here. He had a history of low blood pressure. So after about a half an hour of digging it out of him, the captain finally came through and was like, dude, I'm not flying with you on this plane. Because if you get to low pressure and you have low blood pressure, you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke. It's going to be 30 minutes before I get you on the ground. You're probably not going to be alive by the time I land. An emergency descent from 40,000 feet down to zero is very dangerous. Nope. So they called an ambulance. He was able to get off of his own power, but about an hour delay before they got him out of there and thrust back on the plane. Yeah. So didn't get back into Minneapolis till about 6 a.m. And then literally had to get off a plane and go right to work. I had to work maybe 8 o'clock in the morning and then work till 6 p.m. So let's just say I was dead tired.
Yeah,
on Tuesday. So
did you hear the? By the way, speaking of, first of all, hashtag hypotension for those who are wondering. But besides that point, did you hear the Dallas Stars? They didn't have a medical emergency, but they did have their plane where they slammed
rejected
the brakes.
Takeoff.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've actually had a few people asking me about that. So there is a point where you actually cannot stop the aircraft when you're on a takeoff.
It usually happens when it's going too fast to stop the plane and you're running out of runway.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, actually took ground school. I actually flew a plane at 14 before I drove a car. Took ground school out of was it Academy College there in Bloomington, Minnesota. So when you're punching in numbers to the flight computer on any commercial aircraft, it's calculating what's called V1 and VR. V1 is your speed, which at that point you're committed to takeoff. When you go basically from start to that speed, and usually it's around 125, 130, maybe miles an hour. If before you hit that, there's actually a setting called RTO on the aircraft called rejected takeoff. So the minute you pull that flap button up to initiate the reverse cowlings on your engines, you're in full brake mode, and that's not fun. Now, what could have caused that emergency sort of rejected takeoff? Could have been oil pressure, could have been engine. I don't know if they've released any details on it, but I will tell you this: the last thing you want to do as a pilot is to abort a takeoff at that speed. So it must have been something pretty concerning if they had to hit the stop brake on that takeoff. That's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, from what I was told, quite obviously, is that the players were like, yeah, everything pretty much got thrown about the cabin, and we were not ready for it.
Nope, we never are.
Which obviously was. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, if there was anything that really kind of. The next announcement was that there was little smoke in the cockpit after de-icing, which obviously is kind of an issue when you're trying to fly an airplane.
That could have been fog or something, but it also could have been condensation in the air conditioning. Could have been a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, for all you know, as a pilot, could be an electrical failure that would persist as soon as you get up in the air, which
correct.
Honestly, I mean, the airline, I think, did the right thing in this particular instance. As
100%.
As uncomfortable it is for the players, it's better than getting, like you said, to 30,000 feet and having something, not
your options. Your options are much more wide open on the ground than they are in the air. Put you that way. It's one of those things too where. It's like if you're next in line for takeoff, right? You're doing actually an engine pressure check. So you're actually revving the engines up a little bit. You're actually watching the oil pressures. You're watching fuel, regulation a little bit. You're watching your electrical systems. There's so many checks and balances and there's also so many backup systems too, right? That are in these, hundreds of millions of dollars that are in aircrafts. Which is nice to know. However, again, I still love the idea, which is, hey, if something doesn't look right, get it checked out. I mean, there's been times where my mom was flown from the airlines for over 35 years, where, even if something where like a bathroom light doesn't go up, they pull it back and get it checked out. Because again, it could signal a much more serious electrical failure that's in the aircraft. You don't obviously always think it that way. It's like, oh, it's probably a burn a light bulb.
Yeah.
No, they take the mentality as, let's make sure this is actually an isolated problem, almost like in medicine, right, Noah, where it's like,
I was about to say a certain Zamboni driver could benefit from this one, but
yeah, so it's well, it's like this, right? So and this hurts to me to talk about a little bit, but when I had went through a couple of things as a passenger per se, medically, right? Whereas a sore back ended up being something much more serious than that. So it's one of those deals where, you don't just assume that the back is the only thing that's the problem. You actually go and diagnose the entire thing. And, once you confirm it is, okay, it's just a burn on light bulb, then you can continue forward. But yeah, they never assume anything when you're flying. They always say, okay, let's actually make sure this isn't something more widespread, because again, you lose all electrical power and hydraulics in the air. You have nothing to control the aircraft, and you're kind of screwed. So
that's exactly what they said to me. I mean, my shoulders hurt from carrying this podcast entirely, but then they said I'm just a burnt out light bulb. So what can you do, right? Nonetheless, my time off, by the way, for those who were curious, was also the same as Nick's. Not really time off. It was time utilized, essentially. We did have our big nationally proctored exams for what is called ATI exams. They're pretty much NCLEX prep exams, but you have to meet the minimum score to pass. And if you don't pass it, you have to retake the examination, which you don't want to do because they're very difficult. The cut rate for it is like 63%. And it's 60 questions. So you can tell obviously how difficult the tests are when the passing rate, the bottom part of the passing rate, is a little over half of the questions. So they're kind of a challenge there, but we have 3 of them. I have completed 2 of them, and I am safe to say as of May 1st, I know as of May 1st, I passed 2 of them for sure. And the last one is coming up on Wednesday, and then it is summertime for me. Crazy how quickly this semester has gone, and I will have a year left of school before officially becoming a nurse. So very excited, obviously, for that journey, but the tests, hard to find motivation for this last one. So if anyone wants to take my labor and delivery ATI, I would love it. It'd be very nice for anybody out there. But we're not going to labor and delivery on this too much longer, Nick. I think we're going to do what we always do, considering the show took a little bit longer in the main portion. I think maybe we'll do the extra ice session now, and then probably do a deep dive for the Minnesota Wild in the extra ice session. So Dryden McKay, for those who missed the part of the show where we did talk a little bit about Dryden and what kind of he went through, please go back probably and just check that out in the portion for Sunrise View News and Notes. But the long story short is he was found with a trillionth of a gram of Ostarine and his vitamin D3 immune supplement booster, whatever you want to call it. And for those who don't remember, that's a decimal followed by 11 zeros, and essentially accepted a 6-month ban because he technically violated US ADA doping agency things. And I want to put this in perspective. When you talk about the potency of substances, so to speak, Nick and I were kind of having this discussion before the show, speaking of nursing, is that for a substance that does have a little bit more potency, for example, let's say fentanyl, 50 micrograms is kind of, unless you have someone who's really hurting and you bump it up to 100, 50 micrograms or 50 mics, as we call it in the hospital, is kind of the high end of what you would give for a substance that has potentially very debilitating respiratory and cardiopulmonary consequences when it comes to administering that medication. 50 micrograms, there is 1 million micrograms in 1 gram. So that's kind of a good little comparison. And 1 gram is about the weight of a paperclip. So you want to talk about a trillionth of a gram. I think saying that it has no performance benefits is a very safe assumption here, Nick. The question for me is this. We've had these cases come up a couple times now where we've had athletes who have barely been detected for some of these substances. Is there a way for these doping agencies to be able to identify that these aren't having performance enhancing effects? This is justified. There is a reason for this. Or do they just continue to take the stance, say that, labeled properly or improperly, you were detected of a banned substance and we're not going to bend the rules for this?
Your question is premised very terribly, so let me rephrase it.
Thanks. I like it when you remind me of that every time.
Yes. So the true problem here is, and where the doping agency has a problem in terms of how they have to have a stance, right? Because if you're the doping agency and you identify a substance that at whatever level, right? And we can have a separate debate of when or what, how much that actually has an impact, right? But if you've banned a substance that's you're not taking this, you can't have a slippery slope, which is, well, we've banned this, but at 0.0000001, whatever. That just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So what the actual question is, how is it that the public can trust a labeled substance which does not have a banned substance on its label, and yet when it is found in something, how is that the doping agency can find accountability in the purchaser of that product when they've read the label clearly and it's not listed?
Right. And it's been referred to them by their trainer or physician or medical advisor, essentially.
Here's my thing. I don't give a damn who it's referred to, because at the end of the day, the FDA has a giant loophole for whether it's the food industry and what we eat in terms of disclosing what's actually in yellow coloring, or what they can get away with saying it's 0 grams of fat. This isn't just a doping problem. This is a FDA labeling problem. So and I want to clarify this the right way. This is, and I mentioned this before, this is going to happen again. And here's my thing. We cannot have the discussion of whether there was something in, like, it doesn't matter how much. If it's banned, it's banned. Yeah. That is a no-go. You're never going to win that position with the doping agency, because unfortunately, you can say whatever the hell you want. I got it from here, got it from there. Well, prove it. You can't, unfortunately. Right? So the thing is, if we are going to take the story at face value and we are trusting that Dryden is telling us the truth, and I'm not saying he's not, right? I'm just saying that, with the world of high performance, whether it's athletics or something, there's always the opportunity for someone to try to gain an advantage, right? And I get it. It's obvious why. But if he is telling us everything the truth, which I believe he is, and he's taking a substance which does not have a banned substance listed and it's found to be contaminated, why are we holding the consumer, the one that's the cheater, and not the producer of said, accountable? That's my question.
Because of this, I think, is that you can then therefore say, I'm taking this, vitamin D3 supplement, and you could put an actual performance enhancing product inside that. And then how can you determine that the producer of said product did or didn't know about that? And that's where I see the loophole, where athletes would take advantage of that and say, you know what, we're going to take this legal product that it has been approved by whoever, USADA, the FDA, whoever you want to say is the governing body for this. Then you add that substance, and then, the player says, well, I didn't know, it wasn't on the label, because they've added that to that product, So I think that's probably where that maybe comes from. I don't know. There isn't an easy way. I think that's the encompassing point that I think you're making very well. And that's, what do you do in these instances? I think the better question is, and I don't know if science can answer this. Obviously, I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not well versed in chemistry or pharmacology to a great extent.
Neither am I,
but I think when it comes to some of these substances, how do you determine what is performance enhancing? I think when it comes to athletes, is a trillionth of a gram, is that performance enhancing? But
that's at the time of the test too, Noah.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, how do you determine, that, based on, like, if a substance contains ostarine, how do you know how it affects the body over X amount of days, and what is the amount that should be in the body after X amount of days? And I don't know how you test that. I don't think you can test that. Is there a way? You know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting conversation where it's like, I wish we could get to a point where you could say, you know what, anything under X amount of grams of ostarine within 10 days after you've consumed this product makes it not performance enhancing. Because I think we're running into that, where we are having substances, like, from my perspective, And again, I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a chemistry expert. I'm not well versed in that. But my guess on the limited medical experience that I have is that the trillionth of a gram, regardless of that, was present right after the test was right after. Exactly. Like, it probably wasn't performance enhancing, and I would almost guarantee
at the time of the test.
Yeah, I'm guaranteed.
At the time of the test,
I guarantee you it probably wasn't, because when were the Olympics? Because they tested him in late January, and he was taking the supplement in the middle of January. So I mean, he took it for 10 days. Like,
so here's the ultimate problem with that stance is that's at the time of testing. Then it opens the door as, okay, well, did you take this months ago? So you were still taking a banned substance. So either way, regardless of how much is in there, you're taking a bad substance as it's written by the governing body, the anti-doping agency.
But that's what I'm saying. If you can declare, yes, I purchased this specific thing on this date and consumed it from this date to this date, we have empirical evidence that can say, not definitively, but that can say, if you take this medication, if you take this substance in the medical world, we're not just talking banned substances, we're talking anything. You can predict what it's going to do to the body over a course of days. That's the reason why a drug test is able to do what it does, because it can predict how long a certain substance will stay in your system. So I feel like there's got to be a way at some point, I'm not saying within our lifetime, I got no idea, but where we can figure out where some of these substances, how they do show up at the time of testing relative to when you anticipate, I don't know. It's a sticky situation. That's the long and skinny of it for sure. But
yeah, I mean, it's also like, don't eat a lemon poppy seed muffin before going getting a meth test. Don't do that. So
seriously.
And for those who actually, that is actually not a myth. That's a true thing. It is an actual thing. A poppy seed has the same, even though it's not, any reactionary thing in the body, but it does test positive for the amphetamines during a drug test. So that's actually a proven fact. And yes, I'm hearing somebody in my right ear screaming through a door trying to tell me what it is. And I don't care. I'm not a medical professional. I'm totally butchering this. I do not care at this moment. So either way.
But that's exactly how those things are. And that's why it's important to, I don't want to say have chain of evidence, but really make sure if you are putting anything in your body, make sure that you have account of that and you are accountable with that. Like for example, we were having the discussion. So for example, Ritalin, essentially, is a very good example where, when you mentioned methamphetamines, variants of that are extremely similar to the actual, what you would call the street drug for that are given for example, CNS stimulants for ADHD, things like that. So, there are things that go in there that make these tests complicated. And really, like you mentioned, the governing body has a difficult time. You think about how many times people have either been able to circumvent the process or try really hard to find new ways. It's hard to beat the police in this case, because there's always going to be a new substance. There's always going to be a new way to do this. There's always going to be a new way to take a substance or find a way to try to find some loophole if you can. So it's a challenge. And I think at the end of the day, I really feel for Dryden McKay, because like you said, I really think he's telling the truth as well. And honestly, I'm really happy that this issue maybe came about essentially in the middle of the summer, that hopefully doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on his particular career. And a 4-year ban, I think in general would not be appropriate for him, because.
Well, and I think that the fact that the signing by Toronto after the ban, I think tells you where they feel the storyline is. So if there's any sort of, how does the hockey world feel about it? I think that's very telling.
So I saw a couple people, because, Twitter is,
a cesspool for information. Yes.
Intelligence. What is it? So the Hobey Baker Foundation obviously announcing they're standing by Dryden McKay. I'm going to ask you this rhetorically. Was this the right move by the Hobey Baker Foundation to keep Dryden McKay as the winner for this year?
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's not an easy call for them either, right? So because, there's a lot to say here, right? So again, the doping agency has a very black and white framework to work with, right? Whereas when you take yourselves out of that framing, there's a lot more gray in this scenario than, they really can get into, right? So where the gray area, I think, gets, and if everybody has confidence in what's, was he being forthcoming, right? It's kind of like when you're interviewing, somebody after like an accident, and you can kind of tell like, okay, yeah, no, I was going 65. Yeah, I looked over my shoulder. I didn't see him, and I sideswiped him. You can get the sense that someone is being truthful, where it's just like, no, dude, I was going 40, and then somebody walks up, it's like, no, dude, he was going like 75.
Yeah, and it doesn't match.
Witness too, it's like, no, he's going 75, right? There's more to it than that.
Yeah, and the Hobey Baker Foundation, I think that's probably the way I should have framed this question. The Hobey Baker Foundation referenced the investigation that was done by the NCAA, and that they knew about this issue. So my question is, did the NCAA handle this correctly, knowing this in early February?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the problem with the way that we have discussions now is that it's, was this the right move, or, did they fail or did they succeed? It's one extreme or the other. No, like actually dig down and read the investigation. And I think if you do that, I think everybody would come to the conclusion as, okay, it looks like this was not like Dryden was trying to hide anything. Once the issue came about, he was very cooperative, everything he disclosed. So it wasn't like, again, he was trying to delay or hide anything. You can discern a lot from somebody's actions related to investigation with how it usually turns out. So again, I think if you actually go into the details, funny details, social media, never happens. Then I think you can come to the conclusion as, yeah, no, this was the right things came about. And I think at the end of the day, what happened was about as best as it could be.
Yeah. So circling back to our original discussion, because I know we've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. So I'm trying. I agree with you 100%. I want to put that out there right now. I'm trying to qualify how we've talked about, doing the right thing when it's black and white, but not so black and white in a sense, but also understanding when we've just talked about, what, he took a banned substance and there's evidence of that banned substance. How do you go about that as the doping agency to be able to say like how they're determining how 6 months is the appropriate ban? Because like you talked about, the NCAA, if you want to be technical about it, essentially let an athlete who tested positive for a doping violation continue participating in his sport. And that's why I'm wondering, how do we qualify that by saying there are parameters in place, like we just talked about? It needs to stay that way until we find a better option, which we don't have this particular time, but also saying that there is some push and pull here. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand my question or not really?
Not really.
Because essentially not your stance, but essentially your stance, I guess, in the beginning was that there's no way to essentially not make that part of the process black and white, where we say, yes, you've doping, exactly. But then our reaction by the league, if you're going to take the stance that doping is doping, which it is, technically, then the NCAA has pretty much just said, and I'm just being devil's advocate here, that it was okay in this instance because of the amount that was found. You know what I'm saying?
Not necessarily, no. So no, the framing isn't correct here from how you phrased it. You have to understand the body and the position of authority that they're in, right? So it's the same reason why, let me try to find a good example. I probably can't this Sunday morning. So let's just go it this way. You can't, as a doping agency or help. Screw it. So my brain isn't functioning. So, and we're running out of time. So, the doping agency cannot take the stance of the gray area. They literally cannot, because you talk about opening loopholes. That's what would happen if they were to take individual situations and try to dissect it, right? That's the job of the NCAA. So they can operate in a gray. The doping agency cannot. Their sole job is to say, did you test positive for a bad substance? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, well, then we have to do this because our procedure says this is what we have to do. That is their very limited scope on the situation. However, the NCAA isn't bound by that same framework. They can come over and say, yes, we understand that you have found banned and took a banned substance. However, we can account for the entire investigation, which is, okay, we can take into account that you took a substance that did not have this in its label. And just to throw this out there, we visited their production facility and saw that when they changed from one supplement to another, they never cleaned anything. So that's how this trace of this can end up in something in the past, right? I'm obviously just throwing this out for an example, but they can take those storylines and they can let that impact their decision, whereas a doping agency, they cannot.
Yeah.
That's the issue, is that they're both parallel. They're never going to intersect. But it's how do you take those two parallel lines and frame a story that way?
I may not have asked the question correctly, but I got the answer that I was looking for. I was hoping you were just going to qualify it for our listeners, because I've seen that question a fair amount of times, and I agree with you 100%. I'm not trying to advocate for the other direction. I think it's just important for people to clarify, obviously, on what is going on. The real question is, where's Mel Pearson? Is he going to be the coach of the Wolverines?
I think there's actually a lot that's riding on the investigation in Michigan Athletics right now. And I think that there is some hesitation to extend a coach that is possibly involved in this kind of shenanigans. So, and it's not just him, it's basketball and football, if I recall. I think there's at least 3 sports that are involved in this so-called, I don't know if it's an internal investigation or if it's an external one. Either way, there's malpractice being investigated in Michigan athletics, especially with, I think, trying to suppress COVID positive tests, if I recall correctly, is one of them. And also, I think, if I remember correctly, they're also trying to figure out why that they knew they couldn't beat Western Michigan. That's why they didn't travel. I'm totally kidding. But that should be part of it. But no, it does not surprise me at all. And if you are Michigan athletics now, you don't have a choice. You're not extending a coach until you figure out what's going on with the athletics, because if they end up finding some malpractice here, he's one piece of the puzzle or a statue that could fall. There could be a lot of people that lose their jobs potentially with what they find out from this. And until all that gets wrapped up, you're not going to hear anything about either an extension or someone taking over his position until that has been completed. So not surprising, because we're going to hear about that first before we hear anything about Mel Pearson.
Yeah, imagine that. Headline reads, "Doing the right thing often works, doing the wrong thing often doesn't." Old man yells at cloud. It's prime example in Dryden McKay's case, even when you're doing the essentially right thing, so to speak, or doing what you feel is the right recommended thing by people who have more professional experience in that area than you do and are advising you, sometimes things still happen. So Michigan, not a great scene for them, all things considered, to be honest with you. They don't have any in the playoffs. Anybody in the playoffs, Michigan doesn't, as far as NHL hockey is concerned, but there is a certain state that does. It might be Minnesota and the Minnesota Wild. We're going to talk all things NHL playoffs as we head on to our Extra Ice session. Welcome into episode number 109 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, our Extra Ice session. Myself, Noah Grant, alongside with Nick Maxon. We just had a riveting discussion about the doping world and how all of that works related to Dryden McKay's latest news. If you missed that, definitely go back and check it out in the main portion of the show. If you're just joining us, we are excited for some NHL playoff action that will get started tomorrow on May 2nd. The Minnesota Wild are part of that first slate of games that open up tomorrow night. They do have the St. Louis Blues, but we do have some very good matchups, all things considered. Nick, I did do my bracket last night.
Congrats.
People were not happy about it, mostly because I didn't pick the Wild to win. I hope my bracket's wrong. You know what I mean? Right. But I think before we get to the playoffs, I know I just set that up for no apparent reason.
Not at all.
That's what I do. A couple of stats I think we just maybe pay attention to for the regular season. First of all, the Minnesota Wild, best season in franchise history in terms of their success this season. And I think it's interesting, I forget if they broke the record or if they came very close to their overall points percentage at home. Points percentage. I
thought they did.
So they have the most number of wins in franchise history with 53 overall for the season. But their points percentage at home, it was one of the COVID years that they set the record for the best record because they only played a limited number of games, whatever it was, like 20 games at home.
20%, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to be your outlay or whatever.
Yeah, so I don't know where it actually ended up being, but in terms of stats, the Minnesota Wild were 5th in the National Hockey League, and basically their respective categories. Pretty impressive season: 53 wins, 22 losses, 113 points, the most in franchise history. Just under 700 winning percentage, 37 regulation wins, 305 goals for, and 249 goals against. In fact, I'm curious, so let's enlighten ourselves, shall we? They're still 5th. The Minnesota Wild are 5th in the league in goals for. Goals against, let's see if we can figure out where the Wild are. They are 17th in goals against. So not exactly, sorry, this is going the other direction. Of course, it loads the opposite direction. The Montreal Canadiens are the worst, in case you had a wild guess. Even with putting up a 10 spot, the Minnesota Wild are 16th in the league, exactly dead middle in terms of goals against, right ahead of Nashville, right behind the Vegas Golden Knights and
Not
Dallas
great.
Stars. So, yeah, not great. Minnesota has not been a juggernaut special teams wise either direction. Their PK has not been great. Their power play,
actually,
their power play has been better-ish
Yeah.
as of late, but it hasn't been
Yeah.
anything crazy. They do have some guy by the name of Kirill Kaprizov who did finish 5th in the National Hockey League in terms of his points percentage. In fact, I just realized, I'm rambling here, but I just realized we did not announce our final trivia winner, and it actually relates to Kirill Kaprizov, so we better do that really quick. And then I want to get your opinion on the Minnesota Wild season. So, trivia question, Fight the Pants was our winner. Tanner Heath did win season 3 of trivia. Congratulations to him. Question did read, Kirill Kaprizov holds the Minnesota Wild record at the time of question with 101 points. With 5 games to go in the season. However, which Minnesota North Star holds the franchise record when Minnesota had a franchise here for most points in a season? From 1967 to 1993, who is the North Star who holds the record for most points in a season?
Neil Broughton.
No, Neil Broughton is he is 3rd on that list. Technically 4th. So Bobby Smith, first
Bobby
place,
Smith, yeah.
114 points in 1981-82. Dino Ciccarelli had 106 in the same year. Also had 103 in 1986-87. And then Neil Broughton is right behind at 105 behind that first one for Dino
If I recall,
Ciccarelli.
was that Bobby Smith's rookie year?
Who it might be. I was not alive, obviously.
I wasn't either. I know,
Brian,
shocker.
yeah, Brian Bellows is the next one on the list at 99 in the 1989 season. So it's been a very impressive year for our Minnesota Wild. I did tell former guest Seth Topol about this, that I did predict the top 3 of the Central smack dab in order and said the Minnesota Wild were going to finish 2nd. You had them finishing maybe just a tad lower in 3rd in the Central Division.
I effectively had St. Louis and Minnesota flip-flopped.
Has it been a successful year for the Wild? Can we say that?
No.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
there's
they only what did they go? 18, what are they? 18-3-3 down the stretch or something like
Right.
that. Insane.
Here's where there's some truth to that, though. The Minnesota Wild fan base does not care about the regular season right now. They haven't for a while. They want to care about getting past the first round. And honestly, Noah, if they can get past the St. Louis Blues,
Yeah.
I don't know of another Western Conference team that I'm scared of. I'm really not. We've had
Seriously.
our way with Colorado in terms of staying with them. Obviously, we swung in right with Calgary. In fact, I think we controlled a lot of that game against the Flames. They're, to me, one of the better teams in the Pacific. Edmonton does not scare me. If somehow LA is able to upset anybody, whatever. So I don't know. I feel like our Western Conference final is this series against St. Louis. This is our kryptonite in a team that unfortunately has had our number all season in the regular season, and that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting matchup. I think the other one that the Wild would not want to get is probably Nashville. That's the other team in the Central that could end up in the Wild's bracket should they find a way against Colorado. Although UC Sorrowless Nashville, I think, is going to have a very uphill task. I think
That's going to be rough.
it's Connor Ingram and David Riddick that have a chance to man the pipes. And Connor Ingram has played in 2 playoff games total in his career. And David Riddick is like...
Or
very bad in his.
Or they catch fire, and all of a sudden, you have the hottest goalie, and then they're the Cinderella team. So who knows?
Yeah, Colorado has been slumping a little bit as of late, but they kind of had first place locked up for a very long time. So I don't know
how much stock into that. No.
So why don't we start with the West? Of course, like I said, I filled out my bracket. I do have Colorado being Nashville in 6 in the first round. I think Nashville might put up a better fight than people are going to give them. I think it might maybe take Colorado a game to maybe warm up. Nashville might steal the first one. And then after that, I think Colorado is going to kind of get their rear in gear, and they're going to punch their ticket to the second round. I do have the Minnesota Wild on this side of the bracket punching their ticket in 7 games against St. Louis. I think for whatever reason, I think this team is going to do it. If they can get past the physicality and the way that St. Louis likes to really kind of clog up the middle and really kind of stymie the offense of Minnesota, if they can find a way to just continue to produce, I think the Wild are going to be just fine. And if they can avoid the injury bug, because it's going to be a very heavy physical series on top of that. And a question mark of who's going to be healthy for game 1. But Nick, out of this bracket, who comes out of the first couple of series?
I think Colorado does have Nashville, but I don't think it takes them 6. It takes them 5. I think Colorado has more pressure on them than people realize. They're going to have a lot of roster decisions in terms of the cap and some signings coming up. And I think I don't think it's going to take them a game. I think they know right off the bat, this is Nathan McKinnon and that squad. They're going to be ready to go for game 1. And I think Colorado understands that this is probably going to be their last best chance to make a deep run for the cup before this roster is going to need a little bit of overhaul. I don't see Nazem Kadri returning. He's going to get paid some handsome bucks by probably Chuck Fletcher for 9 years because that's the way Chuck Fletcher goes, and go from there. So no, Avalanche in 5. Oh boy,
this series is so hard.
The Wild and St. Louis series is difficult. Now, what I think can favor Minnesota over a 7-game series is if they continue to push St. Louis in terms of getting out of that trap style and trying to open the ice up a little bit. However, if Minnesota changes its identity and goes back to that heavy bruising style, we've shown that we can sort of play that game, but we're not successful in that type of a game.
That's kind of a recipe for like a game 5 that you're struggling, but your goaltender has kept you in it and you're just looking for a bounce, Yeah. And you might need one of those in that series.
You probably do. Ville Husso has been unbelievable for St. Louis, essentially taking over the number 1 spot from Jordan Binnington, who has looked like utter crap. So I guess go and sweep the leg of Ville Husso. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. That's cheap. But I love our goaltending tandem. I'm still curious of Marc-Andre Fleury a little bit, just because to me, he's a goaltender that I think he needs consistency in his game, and they've been going back and forth. And I get it, you're trying to stay healthy, but I think if your plan was to start Marc-Andre Fleury for game 1, I think you need to give him at least 2 or 3 games in a row the regular season to get him really in top shape.
Yeah, Cam Talbot has just been too good.
He has been. So it just begs the question why we then start. It's nothing against Fleury. Well, again, it's nothing about that. But anyways, I just don't understand it. Anyways,
what's interesting? We did run a poll at the Huskies Warming House podcast on Twitter, and 70% of our pollers did select Cam Talbot as the starter for game 1. So, and I tend to concur. I really do. Cam Talbot has just been too good. I think it's his net until otherwise. I feel very good about the fact that Marc-Andre Fleury could come in and be able to be just fine. I think in this series, he's not Ilya Bryzgalov.
Thank God.
Although Ilya Bryzgalov, for what it was worth, performed in the playoffs better than some other goaltenders that were starters. So,
and he was the 3rd string as well.
Yeah, to his credit. But nonetheless, who are you picking in this series? Who gets a dance with Colorado, and who ultimately makes the conference final in this bracket?
I'll tell you one thing. Game 1 of this series, and it's not about who wins and loses. It's how the game is played is so important to determine how the series is going to get played out in terms of adjustments. If you're Minnesota, if you can find a way to open the ice in game 1, even if you don't win the hockey game, you've set yourself up for success in a long series. Yeah. I do think it's Wild in 7. I hope it's not 7 games. I hope it's a lot quicker than that, but this is going to be a very tight series. And again, it's going to be a battle of just pure attrition coming down to, past game 3. It's going to be just an absolute battle. And I do like Minnesota against Colorado.
Same.
I just do. I think for those listening at TNT, I do like the depth of Minnesota over Colorado. I also do like our goaltending depth. Darcy Kemper is their X factor with Colorado, but again, when you have the 1-2 duo of Talbot and Marc-Andre Fleury, I find that to just be another just confidence booster for this club. I like their depth on defense a bit better. Yes, they've got Cale Makar, but beyond that, I mean, who else really impresses you on the Colorado blue line that, can really spark and skate? I love Jonas Brodin as a shutdown defenseman. He's going to be paired with, against Nathan McKinnon, Landeskog, and Mikko Ratinen the entire time that line is on the ice. So I like Minnesota in that series too, and I'm thinking it's going to be 6 games for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as long as Minnesota can shut down the knee of Curtis McDermott, they'll be fine. I definitely agree. I think Minnesota does punch their tickets to the conference finals for the second time in franchise history, and who else to beat but the Colorado Avalanche on that run? Why not? Shall we?
Let's hope we don't have to come back from 3-1 to do it, though.
Yeah, seriously. But we only need 1 7-game series, and it's probably going to be against St. Louis. So 1 is enough, I think. On the other side, Pacific Division plus the Dallas Stars, if you will. The Calgary Flames getting Dallas. I got Calgary in 5. They are a wagon. This is a team that is absolutely built for the playoffs. They're
so
scary.
good. They're so good.
Stupidly scary. Daryl Sutter has coached this team. Johnny Gaudreau had the quietest 115-point season I think I've ever heard of. Like, I honestly don't understand how he is not. Think about this.
He's a little brother of Edmonton. That's right. So when you got Connor McDavid 3 hours north, I mean, it's unfortunate that, he's not the flashiest player. He's just one of the smarter players in terms of finding space and potting goals. And, he's got one of the best setup men, Elias Lindholm, too, on his line. And he's got Matthew Tkachuk as well helping him out. That's a very good line. Yeah. And like you said, very underrated because they're not like the flashy Trevor Zegras type, but they know how to cycle in and out to find open space, and they just execute.
They're the best top line in college hockey.
In college hockey?
They're really good in college hockey, but they're even better in the show. I think the only college hockey
it might be a 200-point season if they were in college there, Noah.
I think the only college hockey player would be Mr. Johnny Hockey in that group. But how about this? That entire line is in the top 30 in scoring. The lowest scorer on that line is Lindholm with 82 points. He's got 42
He's got 40 goals.
Yeah, that's the same. Matthew Tkachuk is 8th at 104, and Johnny Gaudreau and Jonathan Huberdeau are tied for 2nd at 115 in the league. Like, that's insane to me. So, they're a scary hockey team through and through. They've got good goaltending. That's the one thing that was the knock on them going through is that in years past, they did not have a goaltender that could keep in it. Markstrom has been an exceptional pickup for this Flames squad moving throughout his career. So I got them over the Dallas Stars of 5. Dallas just can't score. They've got no potency on offense, but they do have Ryan Suter who will log 37 minutes in each game. So don't worry. On the other side of that, I do have the Edmonton Oilers in 5 over the LA Kings. The LA was not a powerhouse to me to begin with, especially down the season. And a Drew Doughty-less LA Kings is a whole lot of trouble for that group. So I think Edmonton gets the job done in that. And I do think the Calgary Flames punch their ticket to the conference final. Edmonton's good, but Calgary, I don't want to be the prototypical guy and pick the favorite, but Calgary is just that good this season. And I think they do put it together. I think this core is ready.
I think Edmonton takes it in 7.
Ooh, okay.
And here's why. Edmonton's goaltending is a laughing stock. And so there's an X factor there that LA could expose. Yes, having not Drew Doughty in the back end for LA does hurt them a little bit, but I don't think it's going to hurt them as much, down the stretches. I think we're giving it credit for, because again, Mike Smith and that Mikko Koskinen. You could have a board there, and they'd have a better save percentage than those two combined some nights. So,
for those who are wondering, by the way, Mike Smith has a 9.15 and a 2.81 GAA, and has been exceptional down the stretch. Though in the second half of the season, he's been lights out. So I don't know, man.
I don't know. I'm still not convinced, because in the playoffs have seemed to unravel. That's just the way they've been as of late. So we'll see.
But do you trust Cal Peterson?
I think Cal Peterson's a capable goaltender. I think he has, been able to make, some key saves for LA down the stretch as well. But if he has to do it shift after shift, he's gonna get worn out way too quick. And I think that's where it's gonna be, the team who has the biggest or the most puck possession in that series, offensively is what's gonna carry that. And if you can stay out of the box too and keep that lethal Edmonton power play off the ice too, that's huge, because when Draisaitl and McDavid are on the ice together on that PP, that's not fun for anybody. So
yeah. So you got Edmonton and Calgary moving on. Who comes out of the Battle of Alberta
Calgary,
to punch their ticket?
Calgary, and what a Battle of Alberta that will be! Holy hell, that will be some fun,
yes.
some fun hockey. And you talked about Jacob Markstrom. Calgary really hasn't had a playoff quality goaltender since Mika Kiprusoff back, in the early mid 2000s. And I thought Kiprusoff was a very exceptional goaltender. Markstrom's just that much better. He's had a great second year. I think he was still adjusting a bit last year. Really wasn't comfortable, I don't think. He's comfortable now, and holy cow, this is the goaltender that the Flames fans thought they were getting in that trade. And holy cow, that's he's a tough guy to beat. Minnesota and Calgary for the Western Final is going to be absolutely phenomenal.
So my prediction for that, I do believe the Calgary Flames get the upper edge. I think over a 7-game series, this team, they're just too deadly to me. Minnesota's had a heck of a year. I think this is where the Wild's run ends. I hope my bracket's totally wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong. I think the Flames do punch their ticket to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2004.
Flower power. This is where Marc-Andre Fleury can make a difference here. Not to take anything from Cam Talbot, but Fleury has the ability to come in and steal you a hockey game. And I think with Calgary, now granted, yes, between Gaudreau, Lindholm, Tkachuk, we've already talked about some of the depth
and a Daryl Sutter press conference, mind you.
And some of the depth they have with, Mangiapane and some others that they have. To me, the advantage I think Minnesota has actually is on the defensive end against Calgary in terms of their offensive abilities. With Matt Dumba back in the lineup, Spurgeon back, that you've got the ability for guys to come in. I mean, for Calgary, who they have? Was it Noah Hannafin that maybe slightly offensive? Like, I don't know. I just don't find a lot of offensive ability from their D-core. Now, mind you, Calgary does a lot by themselves up front with their forward group, but I think
Rasmus Anderson has 82 points this season.
Does he really?
He's got 50 points, but still.
I was gonna say that can't be.
He's sitting 5th. He's 5 points behind Andrew Mangiapane.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of it, sure, but they don't scare me as much. I think there is an advantage to be had for Minnesota on the back end. And I think the one trick to Calgary is similar to St. Louis, where there's a bit of an edge to Calgary's game. If you can stay away from the shenanigans of Matthew Tkachuk, who knows how to play the game within the game, as you and I both know, Noah, if you can keep him honest like that, and that's where guys like Marcus Foligno, Nick Delorier are huge. That pickup for Nick Delorier has been really, really good. I think you'll see Connor Dewar also being, sort of that dark horse, being a bench player if needed be, to provide, that energy if need be in a series like this. I think Minnesota does have an advantage here. I think it's actually Minnesota that takes this in 6 games, and they're going to punch their ticket to the first ever Stanley Cup Final.
Think about Nick Delorier, what it's been like for him to come over to a playoff contender and a very good playoff contender after playing for the Ducks. I bet you he's just chomping at the bit to play some hockey. Seriously,
he's never had a career postseason appearance, so this would be his first ever playoff game. And his game is built for the playoffs. So
he's built for St. Louis is really what he's built for.
Yes, a big reason why he was picked up, right, is you got to have a little bit of that physicality. And Dean Evason, the way he's used that fourth line, I mean, they play a pretty good chunk of minutes, 12 to 14 minutes a night.
Did you see that video? I think it was Alex Micheletti that ended up tweeting it out, but of Nick Delorier, where the officials had to kind of pull him out of that scrum, and he was like, I got 4 games with you, man. I got 4 games with you. Like, he knows, he's ready for it, man. And it's going to be exciting.
It is. And, and this is where, again, like for Nick Delorier, the question is, how do you properly channel that emotion of your first playoff game, he's got a job to do. And obviously, is there going to be emotions? Are there going to be, tussles and scrambles and all those things? Yes. But, if you can stay away from those extracurriculars that can get you into the penalty box, even if it's offsetting, right? When Nick Deore and that fourth line is together, that's a great fourth line. I mean, in Grind, you have Nick Bukestad, you can come in and kind of switch out. But again, they've got some guys out. Matt Zuccarello still isn't healthy as of yet. We're still waiting to know exactly how Marcus Foligno is doing, and that could be potentially a huge loss for Minnesota, depending on what comes of that. So he's going to be an important piece for Minnesota on the ice.
I think the biggest fear for Minnesota Wild fans, I think they don't want to have a repeat of what happened the last time they had an offensively successful season where the Blues bounced them in 5 and it wasn't a competitive series. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, if Minnesota loses an OT in Game 6 or they lose by a goal in Game 7 and the Blues go on to win this series, we're not going to be happy. But I think we'll at least be content with the fact that this team did play a tough opponent and they played them to the very end. I think that's what the Wild fans would like. Obviously, they like a sweep. That would be great. But
not going to happen.
I just think that that's the fear for Minnesota Wild fans. So I think that first game, like you mentioned, is going to be extremely important. Let's cruise through the side of the Eastern Conference and get to our Stanley Cup final, shall we? Starting in the top part of that bracket, the President's Trophy winners, the Florida Panthers, against the wild card number 2 in the Washington Capitals. I've got the Florida Panthers in 6 games in that one. Washington just doesn't have enough firepower, unfortunately, for me. Tampa Bay, Toronto. I have the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games.
Tampa in 5.
In 5, man.
Yep.
Everybody is underestimating how good this Toronto team is.
I'm not underestimating them.
They have to get goaltending, though.
That's the problem. Is the goaltending is the biggest question for Toronto, and even more so the defense in front of them. They're just, to me, that they don't have enough shutdown defensemen, and Tampa they know how to move the puck around. And let's say Tampa's had Toronto's number this year, also in the regular season. Yeah. So that to me is a big reason why. And to me, until Toronto, I'll put it to you this way: if Toronto is able to actually get out of the series, they're instantly in the Eastern Conference Finals because they'll finally have a monkey off their back they've been trying to get rid of for over 20 years. But I still think there's going to be a lot of internal pressure on that organization to do something. And it's going to be quite the beast who's won back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. That's going to be hungry for a third. And Tampa has also, we say quietly, have had a very successful season, being somehow the younger brother or the Florida this year. That's been how many times have we been able to say that recently? Not very often. So
I just want to throw this out there. Take it with a grain of salt, what you will. Andrei Vasilevsky, in 6 of his last starts, has had a sub 900 save percentage and also has had 1 sub 800 goaltending percentage in his last starts, dating back to March 27th. I don't think he's been that great down the stretch. I don't know that he's been great all season. He still has a 916. But he has the same numbers as Mike Smith this season. If you want to throw that out there, I don't know that Vasilevsky has been the beast this season that we've been accustomed to in the past couple of years. Now, does that change? Does that change in the playoffs? But you just told me that Mike Smith's regular season also doesn't mean anything, either. So it's like
it doesn't.
So it's like, does Mike?
I trust Vasilevsky over Mike Smith in a playoff game.
Well, obviously, but I'm just saying, I think Toronto has a better shot in this series. And honestly, here's why. Toronto has absolutely nothing to lose in this series.
Everything, actually.
They have nothing. They're playing the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions.
They're not looking at it the right way. No way.
There's no wrong way to look at this, Nick. Toronto has no pressure. They haven't gotten past the first round since whatever it's been, 2003, 2004. Everyone knows that. But if there's one team besides the Florida Panthers that I would be okay with losing to, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Tell that to the Toronto fan base, as to GM Kyle Dubas, his job. I think his job is on the line.
To be honest, the chatter that I hear from Toronto fans is they're feeling more relaxed about this series than pretty much any series in the past decade. I think that they're all right with this matchup because Tampa.
I guess they're not playing in Boston, so that's a positive.
Yeah, well, I've got Tampa, I got Toronto in 7. Regardless, our 2 teams will meet the Florida Panthers. I think the Florida Panthers punch their ticket to the conference finals. Yep. You agree?
Yep.
Okay, taking care of Tampa on your side. So regardless, Florida still punches their ticket. on that side. On the bottom half of the bracket, the Carolina Hurricanes in 7 games do beat the Boston Bruins, in my particular opinion. I think Boston might give them a little more run for their money than we're willing to admit. I don't think Boston is particularly healthy at this particular stage, but I don't know that Carolina has impressed me down the stretch. New York Rangers beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in 5. This one I had a tough time with. I could see the Rangers very easily winning this series, but I still have Carolina hanging on for the victory to go to the conference final. So
Carolina for sure.
All right. Do you have the Rangers beating the Penguins too?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Penguins are beat up.
Yeah. Carolina, Florida, conference finals.
Panthers.
I have the Florida Panthers punching their ticket. You have the Minnesota Wild in this matchup.
Yes, I do.
I have the Calgary Flames. I think the Calgary Flames win their first Stanley Cup since 1989 over the Florida Panthers.
Minnesota wins its first ever Stanley Cup. Mark it down.
All right, everyone hates
somebody's winning their first ever Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
in that matchup.
Yeah, for the Minnesota matchup, yes. Nick, when is the last time, the only time that the Florida Panthers have been in a Stanley Cup final? What year?
That was recently. That was 19. It was the year of the Colorado Avalanche's first ever Stanley Cup. Was that 96?
It was 96. Noah Grant was not even alive yet. So yeah, I was a December 96 birthday. So it's going to be interesting. I think this Calgary team is just too good. I think
that was an overtime. That was an overtime.
Yeah,
winner too. Was that Jurgen Krupp?
Yeah, but it was 4-0 the series.
Yeah, but still,
Florida didn't have a sniff. But regardless, let's go back to that clutch and grab. Heck with the fly zone NHL stuff, Nick. But to wrap up the show, Minnesota Wild, St. Louis Blues. We've touched on some points already. Final thoughts. What do the Wild ultimately have to do to win this series and get out of the first round?
They got to keep it a skating series. They do. As much as they can. They have to stay out of the scrambles as much as they can. I know St. Louis with Berube, they love that game within the game. They're going to try to get under your skin. They're going to try to slow things down. The one thing about Minnesota in this season, and I think I haven't seen this in years past, have they been able to adjust and play different styles and be successful? Yes. So I do like that. But got to stay out of the box too. Their PK has not been great. Let's be honest. Minnesota's PK has been pretty bad, actually. They're sub 75%, if I recall correctly, on the season. So you got to be able to use the speed, puck possession, wear them down with the possession and the shots on net. And I think you do have to kind of get into Husso's kitchen a bit. With any goaltender in the playoffs, it all goes down to those grease pan goals. Thank you, Dave Shayak, for that. But that's what it comes down to. You got to be able to get those dirty areas, be able to take a little bit of punishment legally, right? I'd love to see how they call the cross checks in the playoffs. That's right. They're going to call a damn thing. But anyways, but work the corners too, work below the goal lines. If you can get and wear them down just by making them defend a bunch, I think you can turn the tides in your favor. Whereas if St. Louis gets, especially that top line, O'Reilly, Tarasenko, David Perron, just name a few guys, if they start getting that cycle going, it could easily go the other way. So that's what you have to do. You have to maintain control of the puck, get it 200 feet, and try to wear them down with defending.
Yeah, I think the Wild, they can't change the way that they play. They obviously have to be defensively responsible, but they can't shy away from what's gotten them here. And that's been creative, but not too cute in the sense, but just being willing to create enough offense to create enough havoc. And that's led to the production that this Minnesota Wild has seen that's been unprecedented in franchise history. So it's going to be an exciting series. For those of you who are wondering, it does start on Monday. The games are every other day, all the way to Game 7 if needed. And I say if needed because it probably will be needed. But nonetheless, first 2 games are in Minnesota on Monday and Wednesday. Both of those 8:30 start times. That's got to be Eastern time. It has to be, right?
Probably.
I don't. I have the small calendar pulled up, so it's 8:30. It's either Eastern or Central. I have a feeling that would be Central
Eastern
time.
8:30 Eastern, I think.
Yeah. 7:30 Central is what I mean to say. Like an 8:30 start time in the Central would be kind of odd. But yes, St. Louis. will follow on that Friday and on that Sunday. So what does that mean for our show? We will be back. I think we're probably going to record Saturday night, the 7th, right in between those two games, game 3 and game 4. I think maybe we'll probably be.
Sure, we can try that. Yeah.
Will probably maybe be what we're going to try to do at least. So that third game, game 3 will be 8:30 in St. Louis. Game 4 on that Sunday will be at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. So keep your tabs on that one. Game 5, if needed, in Minnesota, that will be the following Tuesday. Game 6, if needed, in St. Louis, the following Thursday. And Game 7 would be on Saturday, the 14th, in Minnesota, if the series goes the difference. So support the Minnesota Wild. Definitely be active. Tweet us on Twitter if you have any questions. We'd love to hear what you think of the series, and we will be covering it all. Nick, anything else to add for episode 109?
No, we good.
Yeah, seriously, go Minnesota Wild, and tune in for game number 1 on Monday. That will do it for us, and we will see you back in the den for episode number 110.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.